I've been wanting to make this video for a while, talking about children and adjustment to aliyah and some of my observation about it. My own children were 5 and came into pre-grade when we moved here and are now 8. So I've observed a kind of 3-year process of adjustment, and also observed in my work what it means to adjust to moving countries. And I don't think I anticipated or felt particularly prepared for the challenges, and so I'd like to open a space to think about that in this video. There is the idea that children pick up the language easily and integrate more easily than adults, and ultimately become Israeli more easily, especially if they make aliyah during preschool or primary school. The first thing I wanted to say is that children respond to aliyah based on their personality. So some children are more what we say in Hebrew, zorem, like go with the flow, and they seem to adjust more easily. One of my children adjusted quite easily. I remember a play date she had with an Israeli child where the Israeli child didn't speak English and my daughter didn't speak Hebrew, and they were great friends and they just spent the whole play date giggling. So you do get those children who respond more, who integrate more easily to unfamiliar situations. But many children don't and find it really quite difficult. And I want to say something about what specifically is difficult for children. Obviously, children's main setting that they need to adjust to, or one of the main settings, is school. And in Israel, school comes with a different language. If you're coming from an English-speaking or non-Hebrew speaking country, then that is one of the major challenges that children will face. And my husband is a Toshav Choser. He's a returning resident. And he came to Israel when he was 9, and he said he remembers not speaking Hebrew and then speaking Hebrew. So that gave me the idea that it might be somewhat effortless, that a child just learns Hebrew by osmosis. But my husband also has a Zorem personality. He's got a go with the flow kind of personality. And it's actually not the case that people just adjust and learn Hebrew by osmosis, that children adjust and learn Hebrew by osmosis. In fact, for many children, it's a great challenge of aliyah. I remember, people tend to minimize this. When my children started pre-grade, what's in South Africa called grade R, or here it's called Gan Chova, where they were 5, in September. School starts on the 1st of September here. And the teachers, one of the teachers said, they'll be speaking by Hanukkah, like by December. And that wasn't the case. In fact, they weren't speaking within 3 months. It's not such an automatic thing. It was actually more like by Pesach, they started being able to communicate more in Hebrew, understanding, speaking, still not fluent. So there's a period of receptive language, of hearing the language, and then a period of being able to speak. But the environment is very unfamiliar for children. There's a language shock, there's a culture shock, and for South African kids who are often collected from school in our milieu at like 1 o'clock and then looked after at home by a nanny and maybe a parent who's coming and going and around, to stay at school until 4:30 in the afternoon in a foreign language with a foreign culture can be very difficult and quite a shock to the system. The child can really feel like a fish out of water. And some of the ways that I've seen this manifest is school refusal, so children refusing to go to school, needing a break from school. It's also a big shock to suddenly be at school 6 days a week. So children in this country have school from Sunday to Friday. Friday is half a day. And don't think they don't notice it, that they suddenly say, I miss Sundays. We used to go on outings on Sundays. Now I'm at school every day except for Saturday, and that is quite a big shock to the system. And I would say it takes about between 1 and 2 years for children to really melt in. And when I'm talking about children, I'm talking about my observations of between ages of 5 and say 10, to really melt in and acquire the language and the culture is not an automatic thing, and as I said, can manifest as school refusal. The other thing that I've seen parents and families struggle with is children feeling angry with parents and becoming quite digging their heels in about things. So, for example, there's this logic that comes up in families that you uprooted me and brought me to this unfamiliar environment, and now you've asked a lot of me. This is all sort of subconscious. It might not necessarily be articulated, but you've asked all this stuff of me, and now don't ask other stuff of me. Don't ask me to go to people for Shabbat lunch and be nice about it. Don't ask me to cooperate with doing homework or with family commitments. You've already asked so much of me that I'm not going to be easygoing at bedtime. I'm not going to be easygoing with getting ready to do things and comply. So that parent-child relationship takes a lot of strain in the first year or two. And I mean, you might want to give your child grace and understand that. But eventually, in my family, we had to reestablish that, I'm the boss, I'm the parent, as much as we're in a liberal context around parent-child relationships. When I say it's time to go, it's time to go. When I say we're doing this, we're doing this. So reestablishing that authority or hierarchy, however you want to negotiate that, that there is a parent role and a child role, I think took a bit of time after the shock of immigration. And I think that's really common, that there might be a bit of turmoil within the family system for the first year or two. Now, as I said, there is the child that has a bit of a more easily adaptable temperament, and the child who finds it more difficult. And I actually think many children are in the latter category, that would find it more of a shock to the system and take a bit of time to adjust. So that is some of what I can share from my observations and experience. And I want to say a few things about some of the things that might be facilitative or make it a bit easier. First of all, I think that acknowledging the child's anger or frustration or difficulty, talking about moving to Israel and having a positive identification with Israel. I think as a family, if you are identified positively with the country, the language, the culture, the whole family can have a shock to the system. So I also think with language, if you as a family try to learn Hebrew and learn with your child and go through the process with your child, I think children can maybe be a little bit jealous that the parent doesn't have to go to school and endure the long day and the culture shock. In fact, my daughter said the other day, because I work my own hours, she said, Mom has so many hafsakot during the day. Hafsakot are breaks. She had a fantasy that I'm not subjected to the same rigors of the school day where things are taken out of my hands. And yes, I do work my own hours, but I'm not sort of, I don't know, chofshi. I'm not free, like, a person of leisure all day long, which is maybe what she imagined, that being in control of your own destiny, which I guess sometimes adults do have a bit more freedom than children, and that can be quite difficult for children. But I do think that maybe suffering a little bit alongside your child, so you doing your Ulpan homework or learning Hebrew alongside your child so that you share what they're going through, can help your child quite a bit. But I do think that being prepared and being ready to roll with the punches a little bit, that you can expect some disruption in the family system, and sometimes seeking an English-speaking therapist, if you're from an English-speaking country, can just offer a point of cultural familiarity. I've also seen children looking to hold on to what's familiar through TV and devices. So Roblox at the moment is huge, as we know, among children, and sometimes children are able to maintain contact with friends abroad or some kind of familiarity, and it can be alarming for parents for a child to become quite into TV or into devices for a while, just to facilitate a sense of continuity of experience, because the whole self is uprooted and put in another environment. So these things it doesn't have to be forever, but for the first year or two, they can be an aid to the child. Yes, eventually maybe a crutch and you need to dial it down. But yeah, I want to open this conversation, and anyone who wants to comment or DM me about their own observations about children and immigration, aliyah, I think it's important to be prepared and thoughtful about what a big change this is for families.